Okay, I believe we are live with the starting soon screen. Oh, it's 1 o'clock right now.
Well, let's just make sure everything's good there.
So I think it's good. Um, we should be muted in this view, but don't do any of your swears, you know.
Yep.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, I can.
Check your microphone input? You good?
Yeah, I thought there was audio coming through on the stream.
Oh. Okay. I'm gonna put us live. Is that cool?
Yeah, are we on the right slide or scene from my end?
Um, this is the two box view. When we show slides, you'll have to stack us.
It might when you do because you'll do that through sharing, right? Sharing your screen. I think it might automatically do that. But yeah, I can.
Okay. All right, we're going live. All right, Zach, I think we're live. It's 1 o'clock.
Let's do it. It is Sunday. We've got 11 games left on the men's side. 32 of 43 automatic bids have
Oh,
been
Ryan
claimed.
says that we've been live, so maybe we were live. Sorry, go ahead. Keep going. Don't listen to me. Just run the show.
Why would I start now? I never do. Why would I start now? Yeah, I was just saying we got 11 games on to go here on the men's side. 11 bids left to be claimed. 32 of the 43 at-large bids have been claimed. Before we really jump into the rundown here, any kind of just general thoughts that you want to offer as we move from the craziness of Friday, Saturday into the final day here Sunday?
I'm excited to get out of my basement for a few days. So, but it's been a lot of games. It's been a lot of fun. It's always like a bit of panic, making sure everything's updated correctly and sims aren't crashing and all that good stuff. So sometimes I feel like I'm updating a lot of data, but not really absorbing what the results actually were. But this is just a fun time of year because of all that craziness, and I'm glad to be part of it.
All right. Well, glad to know we had a off-camera mic check that apparently did go live. So, like you said, don't say any of
Don't do any of
your
your
swears.
swears. Yeah.
Okay. Matt, if you want to pull up the slides here, let's just jump into it because
Yeah, you are going to have to stack us for that.
let's stack.
All right. So let's see. How do we do this? That's not it. That's it. All right. We're good. We're doing it live. All right. Zach. Automatic qualifiers. Is that what we want to talk about?
Let's do it. Yeah, automatic qualifiers are up first. Like I said, 32 of the 43 have been won, leaving 11 games to go. Here's just a list of the automatic qualifiers who are into the tournament, and then those 11 TBDs. Let's just run through them, Matt. Let's give a little name recognition to those 32 that have been claimed out of the AMCC. Penn State Barron, Loris is tournament champions in the American Rivers
The
Conference.
Arc.
Mary Hardin, what's that?
The Arc.
The Arc. Um, just don't say Arc. The ASC was Mary Hardin Baylor. Atlantic East Conference, Newman gets the tournament championship there. The Centennial is one of those conferences. We'll see a final coming up later. Out of the Cognac, it was Lehman getting through. They were really the class of that conference that seen most of the year. It got through with a huge victory in the tournament final there. Coast to Coast Conference, Matt, Mary Washington blew out Christopher Newport in the final there. CCIW saw Illinois Wesleyan with a big championship game come back against Elmhurst to claim their automatic bid. Bellhaven pulls off the upset to claim the automatic qualifier out of the CCS. Still to come, the CNE. The Empire 8 was just a nuts tournament, which we talked about on our regular show. And Cuca, I believe the 7 seed, is that correct?
Seven
Cuca,
seed.
the 7 seed
Cuca, yeah.
is through there, which is amazing in an era where we see a lot of 4 or 6 team conference tournaments. The 7 seed out of the Empire 8 makes it. The GNAC will be later today. HCAC was another crazy race. Transylvania parlayed their co-championship in the regular season into a tournament championship there. Susquehanna, another one of those crazy tournament runs. The 6th seed in the landmark will be moving on to the automatic or to the tournament with the automatic qualifier. Liberty League will be determined later today, as will the Little East and the MASCAC. Hope claimed the MIAA championship. MAC Commonwealth was Hood. MAC Freedom was Stevens. The System is back in the tournament for a second year in a row with Grinnell out of the Midwest Conference. Gustavus out of the MIAC. NESCAC and NUMAC will be awarded today with the NESCAC game underway. NJAC, TCNJ got another win against Montclair State to punch their ticket. It was Maine Farmington out of the NAC. John Carroll in their first year in the NCAC claiming a tournament championship there. NACC went to Aurora. The NWC, Whitworth, good to see them taking care of business after getting upset and being one of those bubble teams that was left out a year ago. OAC saw a very surprising run by Heidelberg to claim the championship there. Roanoke got just a clutch game-winning shot from Jackson Bell in a great ODEC final to send Roanoke over Randolph-Macon. PAC, it was Washington and Jefferson. Skyline coming up with 2 o'clock tip time, which we'll get to all these games today. SAA, Rhodes made it 3-0 against Trinity, Texas to get their ticket to the NCAA tournament. SCIAC, we got another 5 p.m. Eastern time start out of the SCIAC, so we got a ways to go. That'll be the last official bid awarded, at least in terms of the AQ. That final at-large bid would still be up in the air at that time as well. The SCAC, Matt, coming up, I believe just tipped. MUW gets the tournament championship in the SLIAC after Webster was really kind of, head and shoulders above that group for much of the year.
Best logo in D3.
Yeah, SUNYAC went to Cortland. UEC, Penn State, Harrisburg. Emory gets the regular season championship, which is how the UAA awards their automatic qualifier. The UMAC went to Bethany Lutheran on another clutch last second, if not buzzer beating shot. Bethany Lutheran, Matt, now back-to-back UMAC tournament championships as the 4 seed and 4th straight overall. How about that? USA South will be NC Wesleyan representing that conference. And in the WIAC, UW La Crosse comes out of that just gauntlet. We knew someone was going to merge. It was just a matter of who it was going to be. And it turns out it's UW La Crosse. So those are the 32 that are officially in the tournament right now. Let's talk about today's schedule here for Championship Sunday, starting with the NESCAC Championship tipped at noon. That's going to be Trinity, Connecticut at Wesleyan. And then we got a whole host of 1 p.m. tips here. Concordia, Texas against St. Thomas in the SCAC Championship. Western New England will be at Endicott for the CNE Championship. Worcester State at Westfield State for the MASCAC Championship. Little East Championship will be played between Keene State and Western Connecticut. And then rounding out the 1 p.m. tips, the NUMAC Championship, Wheaton, Massachusetts, a team that kind of popped up with some big wins, here and there during the regular season. They've turned that into a run to the tournament final there in the NUMAC. They'll be at Babson. A couple of 2 p.m. tips. Farmingdale State is at Yeshiva for the Skyline Championship. The Centennial Championship is on the line at Gettysburg with Johns Hopkins challenging for that. And then a Liberty League final also at 2 p.m. Vassar at RPI. Just one 3 p.m. game, St. Joseph, Connecticut at St. Joseph's, Maine in the GNAC. And then that SCIAC Championship we talked about, a 5 p.m. Eastern time tip. Chapman will be at Redlands. This is a little bit of a bigger schedule than we saw last year. Part of that due to the weather that went through, causing a lot of delays in conference tournaments. Some of those on the East Coast deciding to push it back to today, that otherwise might have been championship games we saw yesterday.
Yeah, that affected games that were supposed to be played Wednesday, got pushed to Thursday, which Thursday games got pushed to Friday, Friday got pushed to Saturday, Saturday got pushed to Sunday. So a lot of dominoes there. Couple cool things. I think that Farmingdale at Yeshiva game sold out in about 8 minutes. I think that's what we saw in social media. So that's going to be a popular ticket there, as those two teams have become, top of the Skyline favorites year after year, most years, right? And kind of a rivalry there. So that game's at Yeshiva. Hopefully a packed house there. Going to be a great atmosphere. So yeah, we have a mix of games here, Zach. Some that will have bubble impact, some that just have big impact for the conference and the AQ race. I think we'll talk about some of that there. We'll also do our best to talk at 1.5 speed because we know this is live and you cannot speed up this version like you can the podcast version. So we'll try to talk really fast and hopefully you can be used to talking as fast. And actually, I can't really do that, so maybe we won't.
Yeah, let's not do that. All right, so those are the automatic qualifiers, and those are really important for setting the table for what the situation is going to be like for those additional 21 bids that will go to teams who have lost in their conference tournament or eliminated from contention for their automatic qualifier. The at-large bids, there's 21 to fill out a 64-team bracket. And so, Matt, at d3datacast.com, every day we're tracking those day-by-day NPI numbers, but also looking forward, right? Any set of NPI rankings tells you what has happened. It will not tell you what can, will, should, might, whatever happen. So if you're looking forward, you got to use something else. NPI looks backwards, but of course we've got a great resource on d3datacast.com for looking forward as well. There's a separate NPI projections page there. And so that's all going to be based on our team efficiency ratings, doing 1,000 computer simulations for what remains to be seen and seeing how that all turns out in NPI. And so based on the fresh simulations that you ran Sunday morning, Matt, there are really 16 teams that are locks in the current picture. Chicago, Randolph-Macon, whoever loses this NESCAC championship game, Tufts, Christopher Newport, Wash U, Montclair State, Mount Union, UW-Whitewater, UW Stevens Point, Catholic, NYU, Franklin and Marshall, Trinity, Texas, Claremont Mudscripts, and Bates. All have been eliminated from automatic qualifier contention. And in those simulations, 100% of the time, they were in the tournament field. So those are our 16 locks.
Yeah, and just to update some things, Wesleyan was up 2 on Trinity at halftime. Trinity has now taken a 6-point lead. That's not, as you said, that's not going to affect the bubble picture at all. Both teams are in. It's just going to be about where do they fall in the final NPI. So as you said, we have 16 teams that we absolutely know about. No matter what happens with crazy upsets today, everything could go the wrong direction, and we think these teams are all in the tournament. That leaves, I think, 5 spots up for some discussion. 3 of those we think are almost certainly going to go one direction. So I think the teams, we'll just, they're on the screen here. We'll just read it off. UW-Platteville, WPI, and Amherst. They've been looking good on our locks or near locks or at the top of the solid page on our bubble view all week long. These would be the teams that would have to have everything go wrong today, every single upset possible. And then in some cases, even like be at large or at risk of where does the final NPI fall. So there's kind of maybe some overlapping ranges. So in that realm where everything goes wrong, I don't even know exactly, but it could affect like the Wesleyan Trinity Connecticut could ripple through some of these and maybe make a difference for like where does WPI and Amherst rank in there. Like that could have some effects on where these teams exactly stack up. But for, almost all scenarios, those 3 teams are still in, Platteville, WPI, and Amherst, which really means that there's 2 spots, I think, that are really, truly up for grabs today. The last 2 on the bubble look like that they're Otterbein out of the OAC and Elmhurst, who lost the overtime CCIW final. They're still kind of watching all these results around the country to see, do we still have a chance to get in based on things breaking our way?
Right, so that's in this morning simulations, basically 5 bids with some level of uncertainty as just to, who exactly is going to claim them, or it's uncertainty because there are teams who, if they lose today, would certainly be locks. So that's why I wanted to take a look here at not only this slide, but the next one, which is the screenshot of our bubble watch, right? So that shows a list of 21 teams, but we know for sure one is going to drop off this list, and that is whoever wins between Trinity, Connecticut, and Wesleyan, yeah. Right? Yep. Because this list is just showing, anyone's
eligible, yeah,
at-large odds who could potentially need an at-large bid, and their odds should they need one, right? So both those teams are locked; they're going to be in. So that takes when one of those teams fall off this view because they no longer need an at-large bid because they've got the automatic qualifier, that sends this list of 21 down to 20. But then that also leaves some other teams that could fall off with wins today. That'd be St. Thomas, Endicott, Redlands, and Babson. Really, so that kind of sets up the 5 main games to watch. Um, well, so I guess right. So the NESCAC game doesn't actually matter, but between St. Thomas, Endicott, Redlands, Babson, and Johns Hopkins, those are going to be the 5 games that really are going to determine what the final playoff field turns out to be.
Yeah. And that Johns Hopkins one is interesting, one we're going to talk about probably all day today, because Gettysburg was the Centennial Conference regular season champion. They're the number 1 seed there, but their NPI has not been in line for an at-large bid. So even though they're the number 1 seed and they would be the favorite, not an upset, if they don't win, if Johns Hopkins wins, that's sort of like a reverse bid thief scenario. So like on the current NPI views, if you look at what's already happened, as you mentioned, Elmhurst looks like the number 22 at-large team, but we could almost get one of those back if Johns Hopkins wins. If Gettysburg wins that one, then that would knock Elmhurst off of that bubble, and I think that's the only way that they can survive that. So yeah, I think we have 5 games still left that can affect this view, and I think we've just seen in the chat here. Endicott was up 16-0 before WNE scored their first basket, so maybe they're just going to roll. Who knows? And that would be great for bubble teams. That would be Otterbein would start feeling good. Johns Hopkins would start feeling really good with a loss. Those 3 WPI, Platteville, Amherst would start feeling like, okay, there's really nothing that's going to stop us now. But yeah, if we get complete chaos, then we could see maybe some of these odds shift down in a hurry. We'll probably get a bunch of chalk. We'll maybe get 1 or 2 more upsets. I think we've had 2 bid thieves so far. That was, you read them off earlier, Heidelberg in the OAC, and in the Landmark Conference, Susquehanna won that one. So that's 2 bid thieves. Computer still's liking like 3 or 4, so that's maybe 1 or 2 still to happen. But that's why they play the games. We'll have to see what actually shakes out.
So something that was interesting to me, Matt, is we tracked this last year. It seemed like it set up where there was a very clear pecking order where you could go like upset by upset on that final day and know exactly, oh, that's going to cross off, this team. And you just kind of work up the list based on kind of the lowest odds to the highest odds. But what I'm seeing here is a little bit interesting. As we mentioned, once you account for the NESCAC champion falling off our locks list, right, we know that's going to happen, but we don't see another guarantee as to who that next team is, right? That sends that locks list just to 20, not 21. And so what I'm seeing is that there's potentially a little bit of uncertainty as to whether WPI or UW Platteville is that next team up. And I think you see that if you go to our projections page at d3datacast.com. And this has been my new thing, and I've been trying to really get people to use this as a resource to kind of frame some expectations is within the simulations, like what were the minimum NPI value that the team received, what was the maximum NPI value that we received. And WPI and Platteville are both done playing, right? They don't have anything that they can do directly to impact their NPI, but their ranges are very, very similar, which tells me that there's a lot of overlapping scenarios, and it's going to be those final day micro movements that's going to even determine whether WPI is ahead of Platteville in those final rankings or Platteville is ahead of WPI, and thereby who would actually be the next one in, when you have that kind of blank spot on that locks list to the left.
Yeah, and I think, for example, WPI played St. Joseph's Maine, and they played someone else. They've played a lot of teams, Zach. They played a lot of teams this year.
There's probably a preferable scenario for them
as well. So 2 games that are happening today. If those teams that they've already played win, then that pushes them above Platteville. If those teams lose, maybe that pushes them below Platteville. So that's where the games to be played that don't seem like they even have a direct effect on the bubble, maybe in extreme circumstances will have, but probably not, but maybe would have an effect on the bubble.
There's just enough closeness between what their final NPI is going to be that it's not clear as to like who exactly is the next team available going to be, right? So yeah. If we're talking about the ultimate disaster scenario, which ultimately one is going to be more vulnerable to the other because one's going to be behind the other, but it's just not exactly clear as to who that would be.
Yeah. All right, let's go to that ultimate disaster scenario for WPI is probably specifically St. Thomas, Texas loses All those other teams that you mentioned that are favorites loses.
Yeah.
St. Joseph's Maine loses, Keene State loses, and then maybe they tick right below UW Platteville or something like that, and that would be tough for them.
All right, so let's talk about that in reverse. Go all the way to the right here. Elmhurst is still showing up with some chance. So there is some path for Elmhurst to get in, but again, that's sort of the reverse of the disaster scenario. They would probably, well, they would have to, if we're talking about five bids being up for grabs, they would have to see St. Thomas win, Endicott win, Redlands win, Babson win, and Johns
Yeah.
Hopkins win, right? Because then if you took them off the list and then counted the remaining teams, that gets you down to 21, down where Elmhurst would be. So any one of those five that fails to win today knocks out Elmhurst.
And it shows that there's a 18% chance of that happening. That feels high of all those games going the right way. That it's 18%. So I don't know. I'm the guy who programmed it, but it feels like it's high. We'll have to see if that's the case. But I guess Endicott seems like they're up big, and maybe they were big favorites in that one. So we'll have to see how that goes. But that is the specific path for Elmhurst, I think, is every single one of those results needs to go their way. And if we do, then they go from number 22 to number 21, and they get that last spot.
We talked about those micro movements, right? No one, even if you're done playing, no one's actual final NPI value is locked in until all the games are locked. No, like whatever happens, the rest of the country can have, even, it might just be a tiny ripple, but can have ripples through everyone else. But the thing, again, going back to those min and max NPI values in our simulations, Elmhurst is behind Otterbein no matter what happens. Otterbein is behind the Amherst, Platteville, WPI group, no matter what happens. Amherst is behind that dynamic of WPI and Platteville that we talked about, where there's uncertainty between the two, but those two are both going to finish ahead of Amherst. There is some uncertainty. It looks like Johns Hopkins would, if they took a loss and would need an at-large bid, they would be very much kind of in that Amherst range somewhere. I think if you look at who has the larger minimum NPI in our simulations, there's a slight edge there for Amherst, but not necessarily a guarantee that Amherst would necessarily stay above Hopkins, in that at-large comparison should Hopkins lose today.
Yeah, and I think we're a long way from talking about like real scenarios where Amherst is out. We have to get past several. We have to see several of these big favorites topple before that starts getting pretty real at 72%. But if you are Johns Hopkins, you're like, why not just take care of business, right? Why don't you just get that AQ, not have to worry about disaster scenarios? You're kind of third bottom on that list. You just don't want to think about what could happen. You can go, as we saw last year, even though we felt like we had like more of a solid pecking order, maybe results start going the wrong direction and percentages can change in an absolute hurry. You don't want to be in that position.
All right, we have more people chiming in that it's weird to listen to us at normal speed.
Yes, that is the weirdest thing. That happens to me on my podcast. I'm usually like a 1.2, 1.3 guy, and then when you accidentally hear it at one speed, you're like, "What is this?" That's crazy.
Well,
but we've talked to most of you in real life, like John and Ryan. We talked to you in real life. You know what we sound like face to face.
Right. Well, this is funny. So, for the benefit of this conversation, I've said to Matt on other occasions, like, "Oh, I really like this or that podcast. I feel like they just have really great pacing and." I wish we always like maybe felt like that. But then I remember I'm listening to it at like 1.5 times speed. And so the pacing is going to be a little bit better or come across better when you're listening at 1.5 compared to 1.0.
Yeah.
All right. So that's where the bubble stands. Again, I think there's a little bit of clarity in terms of the overall pecking order, but it could get a little bit interesting, if we start to need those Amherst versus Johns Hopkins comparisons, and if it really matters, between some situation where there's only one of WPI or UW Platteville, right? So that's going to be something to keep an eye on, just beyond like what are the remaining upsets and who exactly does that cross off. I think we know Elmhurst is definitely the most vulnerable. Otterbein, certainly, if they see two of those 5 games go the wrong way that we've talked about, Otterbein is the next one that's going to see the axe as a result. All right, but that's not the only big picture that's going to shape the tournament, shape the bracket that we want to take a look at. So let's talk about the top 8 protected seeds, where we have really just one up for grabs, with 7 locks in the simulations coming in today, 100% top 8 odds for Trinity, Connecticut, Emory, St. Thomas, Mary Washington, Chicago, Randolph-Macon, and Wesleyan. Colin Endicott looking good because their top 8 scenario is win and in,
Yeah.
right? And I guess extra double looking good now, considering the start they've gotten off to in that CNE championship game. But if something were to happen, where Western New England to make a comeback there and Endicott to suffer the loss, it would be Tufts that moves into that last top 8 protected seed spot.
Yeah, and the ordering is not locked in. I think I got a question from Ryan Scott off the air about if Trinity lost, what would happen to the number 1 overall seed, and I do think Emory would move into that position. But really, these top 8 are locked in. Mostly they're locked in, maybe top 4 as well. Probably though, if St. Thomas loses, maybe Chicago does actually jump back in, so maybe that's not locked either.
I was looking at that
Endicott
earlier.
can play their way in. Go ahead.
Yeah, there was still odds showing up. I think it was like in the 30% range for Chicago to move into that top 4.
Which is maybe the odds that St. Thomas loses. Is that like a 70-30 game?
No, because it was showing a lack of certainty. I mean, certainly St. Thomas is in with a win, but even like Mary Washington is not necessarily a lock in that top 4. So there was some scenario where it seemed like Mary Washington falls out.
Okay. I mean, yeah, they're 0.042 different there. So there's maybe still enough games to be played between teams that have played teams that can change a little bit. So yeah, that top 4 maybe is a little bit up for grabs. St. Thomas certainly locked theirs in with a win today.
Yeah, so that top 4 and then the next 4 in that top 8 is the more interesting thing to watch than just like who the top 8 are going to be. That's very clear. We've got 7 locks, and it will be 8 with a win by Endicott, and if it's not Endicott, it's Tufts. But let's expand a little bit. Talk top 16. Of course, not a guarantee for hosting rights, but kind of what we like to call the nominal hosts or those that put themselves in the best position to be selected as hosts if everything else lines up. And so obviously all the top 8, they're going to be in great shape for the top 16. Though, Matt, the simulations this morning were not 100% for Endicott to stay in that top 16. So some chance, it was a very small chance, but some chance that they could even fall out of that top 16 with a loss. But that looks unlikely, even more unlikely now that it seems like they're kind of off to a great start in that championship game and certainly win and in for the top 16 as they are in the top 8. But that's where there was a little bit of uncertainty. Then if you went down the list in our projections, Christopher Newport, Illinois Wesleyan, Gustavus Adolphus, UW La Crosse, Wash U, and Montclair State were all top 16 locks, 100%. And then, kind of ignoring that slim chance that Endicott would fall out of the top 16 with a loss, that leaves one spot in the top 16 with Hood in good position, but a chance for Redlands to move into that spot with a win today.
Yeah, and I don't think that's guaranteed for Redlands either, right? So I think if they won, I don't think it was exactly every time that they moved in and Hood moved out. I think there is some maybe squishiness.
No, it was like an 80-20.
Yeah, when those
Hood's
came
favor.
in.
Right.
And I think the same thing, you mentioned Endicott could maybe fall out of the top 16. That
like
also
3%.
wasn't like, if they lost today, I think that they were still like 80, 90% probably, more than that at least, to get into that top 16. So again, probably like they had to take the loss and go whatever remaining results the wrong direction to fall out there. So pretty likely that Endicott will stay in.
Matt, you put out a mock bracket this morning. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, let's maybe sit here for a little while and talk about this. And this is why the top 8 this year, I think, is a really, really big deal. Because by definition, the top 8 seeds are protected in the bracket. So in this mock bracket view, kind of left to right are the top 4 overall seeds in yellow. And then at the bottom from right to left, 5, 6, 7, 8 in blue. By definition, the championships committee, the NCAA Division III championships committee, has approved these bracketing principles that protect these seeds, which means if you finish in the top 8 of the NPI, you cannot play another one of the top 8 NPI teams. They will protect you no matter what from playing them until the quarterfinal, which this year, in kind of the unique combined championship season that we have, that's not going to be until we get to Fort Wayne at that neutral court. So you're set up well for a first weekend host. If you are the top 16 or sorry, the top 8 protected seed, and you submitted your paperwork to host and you win, I think you will host that second weekend as well. There's no reason why you wouldn't, since it's just one team to one site. There's no further geographic questions in play. So it's just all about matching up the teams correctly. So that's how this bracket is organized. Then the teams in gray are other kind of top 16 or top 16 adjacent teams that I've selected to host. I think a couple of interesting things. Second weekend geography. You have maybe more Midwest hosts kind of in those 3 and 4 seed lines, what I'm calling 3 and 4 seeds, and you have more non-Midwest teams in the kind of yellow and blue lines. So there's going to be a couple of flights by definition. We know we're probably going to need a second weekend flight to Emory. We know we're going to probably need a second weekend flight to St. Thomas. This is all, of course, if chalk holds. But then we also maybe need to pair up at least one more, maybe Midwest with East Coast type schools. So like you see Illinois Wesleyan and Mary Washington pods paired up. That's probably just going to be a flight. Maybe I don't even know if there's any instances where that wouldn't be. Yeah, I guess if John Carroll got through or something like that. But that's just going to happen by nature. If those top 8 seeds are protected, then there's only so much you can do with geography to get the rest to work out, unless you really broke up things and didn't have teams host that maybe should, but then you also need enough pods for the first weekend teams. I guess that's just going to be what it is. Our interesting geographic spots, Zach, if you want me to just keep rolling here, or unless you have any questions. MUW won the SLIAC. That's a weird place for a team. There's not many teams in Mississippi and not many places where they could go. I think they could get to Atlanta. That's Emory. They could also get to Wash U, which makes sense, right? Because they're a SLIAC school right now by conference. So I think probably we'll see MUW go to Wash U if Wash U does indeed host a pod. I think that's an interesting discussion. I think that they make sense there, although you could theoretically see them at Emory as well. Emory's another place where you need teams to get to. NC Wesleyan won the USA South. They're a team that could get there. I just mentioned MUW could get there. So there's a few options, I think, for Emory. A big one I think that we've been hearing about on social media is Roanoke, kind of treated as an 8 seed here. And that is indeed a little bit unfair. I think by NPI, they should be more like a 6 seed, or it's projecting like they should be more like a 6 seed. Again, if Division III had actual 1 through 16 seeds, which we don't. But I think even though there's other places Roanoke could go, there's only so many places you can get to make a legal pod in Emory. And I think Roanoke is one of those teams that's approximately seeded correctly. So I think it's like 99.9% sure that we're going to see Emory and Roanoke in the same pod. And I know that's a little bit tough for both of those teams, but that's just going to be how it is. Rhodes there at the 9 seed by NPI, they're probably more like a 10, so that's maybe a little bit in an overseed then. So maybe Roanoke, it gets a little bit of more like a 6-10 matchup, which doesn't only go so far to help them out getting underseeded like that. But that's just going to be kind of how it is. Ryan says MUW can get to IWU, which would be interesting. I guess maybe that opens up things more than I thought it would. So you could see them maybe swap to Illinois Wesleyan. That would be okay. Yep. Let's see. What is the other geographic interesting things that we need to worry about here? Well, I guess Southern California. I think if Redlands... So this bracket here has 3 flights. Redlands flying to Wash U. It has Claremont Mudscripts flying to UW La Crosse. And it has Whitworth flying to Tufts out to Boston. So you could get by with only 2 flights if you decided to host a pod at, let's say, Redlands, put Claremont Mudscripts there. They can bus there, 2 teams from the same conference. Maybe you fly in Whitworth, and then someone else from around the country flies. You could get away with just 2 flights in this bracket. I think if they're outside the top 16, my guess is we're going to see the national committee try to argue that 3 flights is reasonable. It also maybe doesn't increase the number of second weekend flights, and try to get this being maybe a more balanced and seeded bracket. But I think that's still in play, that maybe Southern California hosts a pod at, let's say, Redlands to specifically minimize flights. I think that's maybe more likely if we see Redlands end up in that top 16, then you could say, okay, by top 16, they quote unquote deserve to host. But that's just, that's kind of how it is. One other interesting thing we saw on Saturday, Belhaven winning the CCS. they are drivable to St. Thomas. I thought that maybe they were only drivable to Mary Hardin Baylor. St. Thomas, Texas, and Houston's actually closer to them. So that St. Thomas pod now becomes a no flight pod, which saves us a flight, maybe makes a 3-flight fly all the California teams apart from each other more reasonable, especially if they're not 16. So that's kind of, as I saw it, some interesting geographical things there. I don't know if you have any other thoughts or things you want to talk about bracketing wise, Zach.
Well, we still have scenarios out there in which the SCIAC gets 3 teams in. If Chapman wins that final,
Right. Yeah.
and then that was a question that's I know came up on social media, and I feel like at that point, yeah, Redlands isn't going to be in the top 16, but it feels like it makes more sense for there to be a California pod, and you keep Redlands and Chapman at home, and then Claremont Mudd Scripps gets flown out from that pod, right? Because that sets up like a Chapman is going to be probably not favored in that first round game. Whereas if you have a California pod with if you're able to create a California pod that was fairly seeded that involved Redlands and Claremont Mudd Scripps, you would probably expect, if chalk held, for them to meet up in the second round. If chalk held in a California pod in which Redlands is the top seed with Chapman, well, then Chapman is probably going to be more of an underdog. So yeah, if a SCIAC rematch happens in the second round there, it's kind of unfortunate, but it is what it is. But as the underdog, you're probably avoiding something there.
Yeah.
What do you think about that scenario? I mean, because it's like their top 16 chances go down, but somehow their hosting
Right.
opportunities go up.
Because then you're maybe talking about 3 flights versus 4. I think I like the idea of keeping Chapman, right, as the quote unquote underseed there, because you pair them up with a team that would maybe be seated higher than Chapman. So if chalk held, then you wouldn't get that matchup again.
Right.
The problem with that is making the pod. You'd have like probably Chapman and Whitworth, because the only reason to put the pod in Southern California then would be to minimize flights. And Chapman and Whitworth and Redlands feels like too weak of a pod to accomplish what you're trying to do. You'd probably need Claremont Mudd Scripps in there against Whitworth with Redlands to kind of make it a properly seeded pod. So then you're kind of it's kind of a game, right? You definitely need to be budgetarily conscious, but if you're doing that to minimize the flights and you're also creating a bad bracket, then I think that's the challenge. I think in that case they might just pick Claremont Mudd Scripps to stay to make the seeding work out and try not to get too many unfair seeds. But I think all those questions are interesting and great. I think it's a big difference. I think going from 2 to 3, flying them all out, that's maybe easier than going from 3 to 4. Once you start hitting 4, you maybe start need to asking permission. I don't know exactly how those conversations go between the national committee and whoever's in charge of the actual purse strings and stamping the brackets. But we've seen 4 is not an unreasonable number, and I think that they would try to make a this is the best bracket kind of argument. But I think that'll be really interesting. We did get a question here. Is it possible for Montclair to fall from a top 4 seed, like if Gettysburg and USJ lose today? I think we were showing Montclair 100% in the top 16 there, right, Zach?
Yeah, we were, right. So I know the question said top 4, but I take that as top 16, right?
Yeah.
As to be like, what are the top 4 seeds in a quadrant, right?
Yeah.
Top 16 overall. Yeah. So, in the simulations today, that was showing up as 100% of the time in the top 16. So, just another plug for our resource at d3datacast.com. If you go to our website there, go up to the top, there's a little drop down menu that says NPI. There's the MBB NPI, which gives you the current results to date type thing. But then there's also that next one that says MBB projections. Head to that page, and that's where we have our bubble watch view. Scroll down a little bit further below that, and you kind of see the full range of sims for the entire country, right? And so one of the things displayed in there is the odds within those simulations of finishing in the top 4, the top 8, the top 16, winning an AQ, getting in as an at-large if needed, all sorts of information. So yeah, any of that forward-looking information, really, I want to point out that projections page at d3datacast.com.
Yeah, and so in our simulations of all 1,000 possible outcomes of today, Montclair State always ended up in that top 16. So kind of one of those top 4 quadrants, and I think they will host, right? So if they submitted their paperwork,
Yep.
They will host NCAA tournament pods. A question here from John about guidance from separating conference foes in the first weekend. So specifically teams from the same conference are not allowed to play in the first round. They are technically allowed to be in the same pod if they would meet in the second round. However, the committees try to avoid that wherever possible. I think this year, with looking at 4 WIAC schools and teams like Illinois Wesleyan, UW La Crosse, Chicago, Wash U, maybe even Gustavus Adolphus, possibly all of those teams hosting, I think we have plenty of spots to put WIAC schools apart from each other. So I think the only way we were maybe getting into potential territory was when we were in 5 WIAC school scenarios. I think even if there is a Southern California pod, I think there's still plenty of places to spread out the love to get good seating for WIACs and others, so that we're not crunching them all together or forcing them into bad seed lines. So I don't think there's any path for 2 WIACs in the same pod right now.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, there was a time when it looked like the WIAC might get 5 teams in, and so as someone who's been doing mock brackets for quite a while, just wondering if you've seen the difficulty in dealing with the WIAC schools reduce as you've only had to been dealing with 4 now instead of 5, and then also I think one of the pain points that you potentially had was a couple weeks ago was with Mount Union and not really being able to reach. Within that 500 miles, I think specifically, Whitewater was maybe one. Yeah, that was you couldn't get to Mount Union. So when Mount Union was in hosting position, that wasn't necessarily an option for sending a WIAC school to. Do you feel like where we sit now, things are going to be a little bit easier for the committee to separate those WIACs than maybe it looked like they would have been a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, I think it lays out really nicely for the WIACs right here. I think one's going to go to Chicago. That's probably Platteville, the lowest one. One's going to host. That's UW La Crosse, who won. Then you're looking at Stevens Point and Whitewater. And you have Gustavus Adolphus. You have potentially Wash U. You have Illinois Wesleyan, potentially for a Redlands pod or not. Even if they have that, I think you have 3 places you could put 2 teams. So I think that's going to be fine. The scenario was if you had 5, it's not really distance, right? It's not getting these teams to other places within 500 miles. It's just doing that in a place that doesn't already have another WIAC. So then the conversations I had with myself making mock brackets were, do I try to put 2 WIACs in the same pod and, hope one of them gets beat and not have to meet in that second round? Or do you try to pair one up with, say, a Mount Union, who would be the next closest type of a host, and then find a middle point like the MIAA winner or Elmhurst or Aurora or John Carroll, somewhere in between, not strictly speaking middle point, but somewhere in between, where then we would move that host to try to keep the WIACs apart from each other. But yeah, those scenarios aren't really in play right now. And I think WIACs will be just fine geographically.
All right, Matt, another question here came in asking, could Johns Hopkins fall below Otterbein with a loss? Right. And I think we can say pretty confidently that the answer to that is no. John Carroll would always be ahead of
Johns Hopkins.
Johns Hopkins would always be ahead of Otterbein. And the basis for answering that, again, is just going back to our run of simulations this morning. Within those simulations, Otterbein finished with a maximum NPI of 61.313. Johns Hopkins finished with a minimum NPI of 61.403, right? So within those simulations, the minimum final NPI that was seen for Hopkins was always above the maximum NPI that was seen for Otterbein. So it really does not seem like there is any pathway with just 11 games, going and running sims 1,000 times, right? You're going to be capturing pretty much the range of outcomes there. There doesn't seem like there's some sort of narrow path that is being missed at this point.
Yep. Yeah, I think you got that.
All right. If things hold chalk, where does the NPI break fall compared to where it would have fallen in other past seasons?
Just to clarify, do you mean where the NPI cut line is, or past seasons like old system type cut lines? I think you're meaning like the cut line number, right? Like 61.
Yeah, like what was the NPI for the final at-large bid?
Well, I can say, Zach, I have it up here. In this morning's run of simulations, our lowest cut line was 60.9. On average, it was 61.3, and the maximum was up at 62. And from what I remember, you might be trying to look for that slide that you had.
I know.
That's
I
about
tweeted it out.
the range.
It's just a matter of trying to find it.
I think that's
Yeah.
about the range that has been as high. We looked at, there's last year, and then I think Zach, we had simulated like the 3 prior years of NPI to kind of see where things would maybe fall. And we think that that's basically the range. About 60.9 was on the lower end. Maybe it was 60.7. Or there might have even been a 59. Anyway, we're probably going to get somewhere in the low 61s, 61 to 61 and a half kind of range, which is kind of where it was last year. I think my rule of thumb that I typically talk about is if you're above 61, you got a really good chance at large. And I think that's where we're going to kind of fall this year too.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be above 61, but yeah, that's right in line with the rule of thumb of 61 that we generally have. So maybe a little bit higher than some
Could be.
we've seen, but I think very much in range. Just kind of the fluctuations that you're going to see from year to year.
The NESCAC did go final, so that is 80-55. Trinity won. I should say who won. Trinity won, so they are going to be that number 1 overall seed. Both of them are good for top 16. Both of them are good for the tournament. Not really changing the bubble picture at all right now.
All right, Matt, do you want to head back to the beginning and just kind of run through real quick one more time before we get out of here and watch the rest of the day play out?
Yeah, should I try not to crash the stream and run a live NPI update to the site with that result, or what do we hold off on that for right now?
I think we can hold off on one result for right now.
I think our maybe stream stuttered as I attempted to maybe open that program and then closed it back up. Okay, we're gonna go back to the top. Let's hold on.
I mean, I'm not going to read the list of names, but let's throw up back on screen that we need to add Trinity to the list, huh?
Yeah. Let's
I don't think we really need to update.
Make it a little conversational, and we can answer more questions along the way too. But we'll just add in yellow or maybe green that. I don't know, whatever looks cool.
It's fine.
Okay.
Well, just set it up. Okay, so now we're up to 33 automatic qualifiers that have been handed out, officially clinched at this time. NESCAC joins the group that went final yesterday or in the days that preceded it. I think the Kuniak final was Thursday night? But anyway,
I think, yeah.
Yeah, Trinity, Connecticut claims the automatic qualifier out of the NESCAC, which leaves just 10 more games to go final today. We got the SCAC Championship, the CNE Championship, the MASCAC Championship, the Little East Championship, the NUMAC Championship, all tipped at 1 o'clock. It's 2 o'clock tips for the Skyline, Centennial, and Liberty League, 3 p.m. tip for the GNAC, and a 5 p.m. Eastern Time tip for the SKYAC.
We're on the schedule slide here, Zach. Let's just look at some live implications maybe. We know Trinity won. Very little implications on the bubble probably. At halftime right now, it looks like Endicott is up 48-24. They're up big on Western New England.
Yep.
We've seen big comebacks. I don't know exactly how much Elmhurst was up at halftime on Illinois Wesleyan yesterday, but it was maybe 20. It was in that range, right? So we've seen these kind of games, but we can maybe start penciling in maybe Endicott going on. We'll have to see how that goes. Westfield State, I think, is up 5 on Worcester State. Not really bubble implications there in that game. Western Connecticut up pretty big. 13 points on Keene State late in the first. Last score update I have. Babson up a few on Wheaton, Massachusetts, up 3 at halftime. That one is a bubble implication game too, so that'll be one to watch. And then approaching halftime is the last score I see here for St. Thomas, Texas, up 9 on Concordia, Texas. So bubble watchers are there. They're maybe breathing their first sigh of relief with Endicott. That would maybe keep someone safe if Endicott does indeed pull that one off. And then so far, nothing looking completely terrible for bubble teams as we look at some of these results here, but live scores. So bubble teams are still breathing okay, I think, right now.
Yeah, just the one that is maybe looking a little bit closer for bubble teams to keep an eye on is that Babson Wheaton game, just a 3-point game at the half. But otherwise, the bubble's got to like what they see out of St. Thomas and Endicott so far. So that's good news. So let's move into kind of that at-large picture. Where coming into the day, our simulation showed 16 teams that are absolute locks: Chicago, Randolph-Macon, Wesleyan now, which we can officially call the NESCAC runner-up, having lost that championship game to Trinity, Texas. Tufts, Christopher Newport, Wash U, Montclair State, Mount Union, UW Whitewater, UW Stevens Point, Catholic, NYU, Franklin and Marshall, Trinity, Texas, Claremont Mudscripts, and Bates. Those were our locks, which, basically leaves 5 bids up for grabs based on those 5 games that we continue to highlight, right? With Endicott, St. Thomas, with Babson, with Johns Hopkins, and with Redlands later on. And that's going to really determine the fate of these last 5 teams. Platteville, WPI, and Amherst look to be in the best shape. The most susceptible to upsets are going to be Elmhurst. If any one of those 5 goes into bid thief territory or as an upset, then Elmhurst is going to be out. If we get 2, Otterbein is the next on the chopping block. So those are the 2 that are going to be few, if not no, upsets.
Yeah, and again, I keep coming back to it, but depending on how you classify the Gettysburg Johns Hopkins game as an upset or not, upset NPI wise would be Gettysburg winning. Upset seeding wise would be Johns Hopkins winning. So that'll be an interesting one to watch there.
Well, and this is where I think at this time of year, kind of the bid thief, the who's projected as the AQ or what, none of that really matters. Ultimately, it comes down to who do you actually want to win the game. And right now, regardless of whether you want to nominally assign an AQ or at-large status to Johns Hopkins, there's no doubt that Otterbein and Elmhurst want to see Johns Hopkins win that game. So that's what it really comes down to.
I mean, I don't care who wins that game. I don't want anyone to win that game, but there's probably bubble teams that want Johns Hopkins.
That's why I said Otterbein and Elmhurst have a very clear preference, regardless of however you want to consider Johns Hopkins' status coming into the day and whether or not that is or isn't a bid thief. Otterbein and Elmhurst want Johns Hopkins to win that Centennial Championship game. No question about it.
Yep.
And maybe we can see a little bit more if we move into the bubble watch view where if this is the screenshot from this morning, but if we updated this, Trinity, Connecticut would no longer be on this list because they do not need an at-large bid. They've got the automatic qualifier out of the NESCAC, so that would take this list down to 20. And then as we talked about, it's not exactly clear whether WPI or UW Platteville would be that next team in because in the simulations showed a lot of overlap in their kind of projected range of final NPI value. So it's not clear who would be the next in that pecking order. We do know it would be one of those 2 because the range of NPI outcomes in the simulations always had those 2 above everyone else who's below them on this list. So at this point, one of them is safe. We just don't know exactly who it would be. The next one becomes safe as soon as probably that Endicott game goes final.
Yeah, and right now looking good with Endicott, right? Up 24 at halftime. So someone's going to wipe their brow after that one and say, now my 99% is now 100%. But that's the maybe only small differences until we get a few more favorites that win, hopefully. Well, hopefully for bubble teams. I don't care. As I said before, I don't care who wins.
Yep. So the next team after WPI and Platteville, who will be celebrating some of those locks to come off the list as automatic qualifiers, would be Amherst. Although if Johns Hopkins were to lose, a little bit of ambiguity in our view as to who would be above who. Just looking in our morning simulations at the minimum NPI values, it looks like Amherst may have a slight advantage there, but I don't know that really is enough of a view to tell us for sure that Amherst would be above Johns Hopkins. But even in showing up here, the Johns Hopkins 82.6% chance of an at-large if they need it. There's a pretty good spread there, 15 percentage point difference between Johns Hopkins and Amherst. So that leads me to believe more often than not, in the case of a Johns Hopkins loss, they're going to be behind Amherst.
Yeah, really lean into that H really hard there on that Amherst.
Amherst.
Yeah.
We are way too Midwestern.
Our dialects pronounce the H.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anything else to say on that, Matt, as it pertains to the bubble outlook for the day? I think it's, there's some things that we definitely need to see, shake out between WPI and Platteville. But in general, I think the picture is pretty clear.
Yeah, I think the picture is clear. And I kind of mentioned it earlier, but one thing that's just interesting to me in this discussion, you and I had a little bit of a back and forth yesterday on, do we think these percentages are right? Because it looks like there's a lot of teams. At one point yesterday, there was, I don't even know, like 26 teams.
I think it was 26
on the list. And it's like, this seems like a lot of teams that we're calling 100% locks, given how many games are left. So the percentages we finally did get our mind around and agreed. Yes, they look correct. I still do call out like 18% with Elmhurst for basically all the favorites plus Johns Hopkins winning. That still feels really high. If I was them, I probably wouldn't really be feeling good, but better than like 8 or 10%. But then, what's the difference in a feeling between 10% and 20%? I don't really know how to feel that difference. But yeah, it's just weird when you see 99.9% for WPI even. Like that's basically 100%. But then there's that 0.1%. That means there were simulations that were run in 1,000. That means there was one, right? Where everything just went wrong in a particular way for WPI and they found themselves out, which is really weird because if that scenario happened, we would probably feel pretty terrible. We'd feel like, man, our things were kind of all messed up. But then at the same time, we would see, oh, but it meant Endicott lost, and it meant St. Thomas lost, and it meant Redlands lost, and it meant Babson's lost, and it meant in this case, it wouldn't even matter with Johns Hopkins because WPI is higher than them. So everything went the wrong direction. Plus, whoever the teams that they had already played, I guess Keene State would have already lost too. Just that certain specific set of scenarios. I guess that still can happen, right? Weird things happen all the time. We're showing that it can and did happen in our computers. Like when we say silly things like games aren't played on the computers, that's absolutely true. But also the computers, when it shows 99.9%, what the computer's saying is there was a time when it didn't work out this way.
Right.
And that's still encompassed in the projections and simulation runs. I just find that kind of stuff fascinating. I'm probably the only one out there, but it's just really interesting to me.
Well, if you have a list of 10 teams with 90% odds, those odds say that one of those 10 is not going to be in.
Yeah.
Right. And so individually, none of them is likely to not be in. But when you look at, 9 out of 10
Yeah.
will get in, that means one of the 10 doesn't get in, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the thing to remember. Something else that, we did the show, Thursday night, kind of resetting the picture going into the weekend with some of the scenarios that we were already seeing play out. And at that time, we were maybe a little aggressive in calling that CCIW semifinal between Carthage and Elmhurst kind of a win and in scenario. Going back, it looked like, based on the simulations that morning, if you looked at those two teams, if they lost a final, Elmhurst was at 88%, right? So as things shifted from that point where we felt like, okay, Elmhurst got that win, that's going to put them around 88%. Now they're sitting there at 18%, and it's looking like they just need one of these 5 games to go against them to send that to 0%. When just a few days ago they looked like we were talking about them potentially being in like a win and in type semifinal in the CCIW against Carthage.
Yeah, and at the time, the average number of bid thieves was more like 2. Now it's more like 3 or 4. So that 2 bid thieves right now would have been a big deal to Elmhurst if Catholic won the landmark. I think they lost with the semifinals, so they weren't even in the final. If either Otterbein or Mount Union had won the OAC, then Elmhurst would be a spot higher on the bubble. They'd be maybe more sitting like Otterbein. If both of those had happened, they might be sitting more like Johns Hopkins. So maybe the incorrect thing wasn't their percentage there. It was just the simulation showing a 2 average. And I always wonder, right? We run 1,000 a day just because of computer processing speed and limitations there. If I could run 10,000 or 100,000, would that number have looked different? Does the average bid thieves then go higher because we get deeper into simulations? Does it start getting a little closer to 3? Maybe not that. Maybe it won't make that big of a difference from 2 to 3, but maybe you'd see more bid thief scenarios and get a little bit more specificity there.
Well, and earlier on, the simulations were showing some runs where there was 0 bid thieves, but of course now we're in an environment where that minimum is 2, right? So all of those are off the table. And again, it goes back to 88% is not 100%, right? So they were looking pretty likely, but there was still that 12% kind of 1 in 10 type thing where things could break unfavorably. And as you mentioned, like by the time that projected cut line shifts up and some other things happen around them, it's definitely gone against Elmhurst's way.
Zach, we got another question. You mind finding that, reading it off? Because I'm in a different
Yeah,
view here trying to answer it.
Yeah, there's another is a mock bracket question here from Ice King 34. Back to the mock bracket. How come you had UW La Crosse as a 3 seed instead of a 4 seed?
Yes, that is a very good question. It's probably, I was just kind of messing around a little bit. You're right that UW La Crosse should be a 4, not a 3. I played a little bit of a game with some of the potential second round matchups of trying to not repeat regular season rematches that I could remember. So like Endicott still would have shown up as a 3 line, but I moved them away from Tufts because those two teams had played. So for me, Illinois Wesleyan should have been paired with Chicago and then maybe put UW La Crosse above onto that 4 line. So I just played the game of what if. Could we just move a team essentially one spot to avoid that second weekend potential rematch? I don't know that the committee would or should really pay attention. I kind of just did it for myself. I don't know that it was a good idea, but I did. That's a very good observation, and that's the reason why I did it. But I don't know that I would even argue in favor of it. I just kind of tried it out. I think more likely the appropriate seeding would be maybe like an Illinois Wesleyan, Chicago, and then a UW La Crosse with one of these like Mary Washington as a 4 seed type games.
Well, I don't know if we should do it, but I did it is kind of the name of the game around here.
But yeah, right. I mean, I don't care. It's not good behavior, but I don't care about it. Yeah.
All right, Matt. Any
final question?
Yeah. Any I don't know if anyone in the chat has any final questions. We'll start to wrap up. Matt, let's as we just kind of put out a final call for any questions here, let's advance one here and give a big thank you to everyone who supports the work that we do through the Patreon platform at patreon.com/D3Datacast. Matt, there's so many people that take advantage of all the great information that's on our website. Sometimes I've felt this season like, the podcast we do is sort of secondary to the website at this point. Awesome to see so many people taking advantage of it, to see kind of the page view numbers, which I believe as of yesterday or earlier this week passed 750,000 page views. I don't think that was anywhere near our realm of expectations when we launched d3datacast.com, but here we are. And of course, when we launched that, we decided that we really wanted to do that without any ads and making all those numbers available to everyone. And so we're grateful to have a group of people who've supported us in that effort.
Yeah, and one of the decisions we made was to not put ads or paywalls on the website for the data. So the data is just free and open to everyone. And it's the Patreon supporters that can help us do that, right? We don't feel like we need to make revenue on that because we have people supporting us on Patreon. So we do give early access to our normal episodes for those people. Usually we can get it on Sunday night when we record a Monday morning episode. They get it Sunday night instead of the normal Monday release. But there's a $3 a month and a $5 a month tier, so we thank everyone who has done that. I also, when we started this, didn't expect that we'd have a list this big, but it's cool to see kind of the page getting pretty full. So it's cool all you people out there have supported us, and we really appreciate it.
So if you've joined the stream, on the later side, even though we're going to be wrapping it up here, head back. It'll be available on demand. Head back. You can kind of get caught up on what our initial rundown was, running through all the scenarios as these final games play out, how it's going to impact the bubble, how it's going to impact, maybe who's in hosting position, who's in those top 8 protected seeds. Great stuff. That's just going to be available for you if you go back and listen. But hey, in a few hours, it's going to be irrelevant content because we will have games completed. We will have a tournament field set, and we'll be back with another video later tonight discussing who's in, who's out. And Matt, I think you're going to have a new mock bracket based on our actual teams. Is that correct?
Yep.
Little teaser.
I'm going to build an actual mock bracket. I'm going to try to do a good job with that one and maybe not do crazy stuff. But we'll have a mock bracket. We'll do a kind of a field reveal for people who are unaware. Probably won't do any projections views throughout the day. I don't know that will be updated because I think games are kind of in pretty quick succession. So I don't think that page will be updated on d3datacast.com, although I could surprise everyone. Who knows? But we'll update the live view, which as of now is kind of more important. So after we finish the stream, once these games start going final, we will start to maybe plug in some of those results.
Yeah, so definitely stay tuned to the YouTube channel here for that later tonight. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And Matt, this is a perfect segue into a question just came in from Drew Latrenta. How many shows this week?
So we're doing the live stream now. We're gonna record kind of a mock bracket and field reveal once we know the NPI. Once we crunch the final NPI, we'll do an episode of that. Then tomorrow, we're not going to release that. Will kind of serve. That'll have to hold you over. So we'll have a Sunday night drop instead of a Monday morning. I think the plan is to try to do a Monday late afternoon, early evening bracket reaction episode. I think that's our plan. I'm kind of looking for Zach for his response because I don't know if he's committed to me to be available to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the bracket show is what, 1 or 1:30?
Yeah.
We'll do kind of a quick, maybe it'll probably be just like some notes that we take during the bracket reveal stream, a little bit more kind of off the cuff, but we'll have some sort of bracket reactions video that will go out hopefully pretty shortly after that selection show is done. And then we'll head back into the studio, I think Monday night, to start recording what will serve as like our kind of our normal weekly episode. I'm guessing, where we'll also, as the main segment there, kind of dive into the traditional episode we've done, kind of first round picks and preview type deep dive.
And then we usually follow that up. So that'll be Tuesday morning. I think Wednesday morning, we've typically followed that up with maybe more of a full bracket odds type episode, looking deeper into the tournament at some scenarios, things like that. So I think that's going to be the content plan for the week. So hopefully you'll have a Sunday night, a Monday afternoon, a Tuesday morning, and a Wednesday morning episode from D3 Datacast. That's our plan if both of us survive. At a minimum, we'll see if we throw in some other episodes. The caveat to all of that is you have some kids that are ill. I have some kids that are ill. And maybe we'll both just be on our deathbeds. Who knows? So far, so good for both of us.
Yeah, it's been rough times in the Z Snyder household. We've had 3 fall below the cut line. I'm still hanging in there, bubble in. So we'll see what happens. Okay. But hopefully we're on the upswing and it's a great week.
Hopefully we avoid all that crunk and we can do D3 hoops content out there. Last quick call for questions. Otherwise, we'll probably wrap this up here pretty soon, and we'll all enjoy our championship Sunday.
Yeah, and again, just for anyone who might be joining late, have joined midstream, even though we're kind of going to be wrapping this up, it'll be available on demand. Head back to the beginning, get the full rundown, get the full context for the day, and we'll see you back later here once we have an actual tournament field and a new mock bracket from Matt based on who's actually in and where teams might be headed.
And if you have questions throughout the day, I think at D3 Datacast on Twitter, that's a way you can get a hold of us, ask us. We'll see if we can respond. If it's something we know the answer to or something we can project the answer to, we'd be happy to do that, I think.
All right. Sounds good, Matt. Let's get out of here and go enjoy the rest of the day.
All right. Good job.